Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to our Dungeons and Dragons game. I'm your host, the Dungeon Master, and as of me recording this, we played a game today. It had been a while. The last time we played, things didn't go the way, certain people were expecting. There were some people that didn't really have that good of a time. So, like there was how people felt on the day of the game. And then there was kind of like after a week or two went by and people had time to think about it, the next time we got together to play, and I said, "What game do you guys want to play this weekend?" Like nobody wanted to play D&D. They all wanted to play other role-playing games. And so we did. We've been playing like pretty much every week since then, just not D&D. So months go by. And where I live here in rural Ohio, we have a really nice Renaissance festival down by Cincinnati, and it happens about this time of year, right? So for me and my circle of friends, all the gamers, we associate the autumn season when the leaves change color and things get cool and we start to see apple cider, for sale at the grocery store, stuff like that. For us, we associate all of these things with the fantasy genre and with Dungeons and Dragons, right? The other thing is like when Spirit Halloween opens, you go in there and a lot of times they're selling like plastic swords and armor and a battle axe or skeletons or whatever. And this stuff also reminds us of Dungeons and Dragons, right? So so everybody had kind of been bitten by the bug, so to speak. And so everybody was really, really in the mood to play D&D. So for the first weekend in October, I was like, what do you guys want to play this weekend? And everybody said D&D. So I was like, great. And so the irony is as we're sitting down to the table to play, everybody wanted to be there. Everybody wanted to be playing this game specifically. Everybody knew what we were doing, thought it seemed appropriate to spooky season because the theme of the dungeon, like I think I said it in the last video, we did kind of like an homage to Shaun of the Dead, where it was zombies in London. Um, but then the other thing I had mentioned was I think it's from one of the Romero zombie movies. They have this famous quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it's something akin to when hell is full, the dead shall walk the earth, right? So the theme of this dungeon was going to be undead things from the Monsters Manual and infernal things from the Monsters Manual, right? And I actually went online and I found a map of the catacombs of London. And so I bought a bunch of poster board and I made this huge map. We set up a big table and I had like a big map on it that I put like a lot of work into, and I'd figured out, what creature was in which part of the map, and so on and so forth. So all of this is set up, and then we go to play, and so as they enter the dungeon, they're in a bottleneck. And I didn't think this was going to be the problem that it was, but it was, right? And so at the end of this hallway, there are three hellhounds. And this is kind of like a Cerebus, or some people say Cerberus, but it was an Easter egg. It was a reference to mythology, to the three-headed dog that is the guardian of the underworld, right? So that's why I put three hellhounds in there. And by the way, everybody got it. Everybody thought that sounded like a good idea, sort of like thematically, right? But so what happens is we roll initiative, and my wife, whose character is which we made in third edition, by the way, we applied the half dragon template to an air maiden. So that's her character, and she gets to go first. And because of the dragon part of her, she gets a breath weapon. So she uses that, and basically nothing happens. Nothing amazing, you know. So then it's the hellhounds get to go next. And so each one of them picks a different member of the party and hits them with its breath weapon. And so one of them hits the party troll, played by Brad. And Brad did not say this. Hopefully, Brad is listening to this podcast. And if I misrepresent anything, he can chime in and you know what I mean? But I don't think he thought he was ever going to have to deal with fire. To me, he seemed like really surprised that there was a fire oriented bad guy, right? And he thought that just as a troll, he was going to be like kind of immune and he was going to just kind of have his, what would you call it, like his free reign. You know what I mean? Like he would just stomp through the dungeon completely unchallenged, you know? Like, I mean, again, he didn't say this, but that was kind of, um, that was my understanding based on what was said. So he gets hit by fire and it takes him down to I can't remember now how many hit points he had left, but it was lower than he liked. And so he was like, you know, I need to go someplace else and like we need better gear and you know all this stuff. And like we had to kind of stop the game and I had to talk to him about like, well, you know, you've got like your starting equipment and like that's what you've got. And he is a dungeon master where he runs D&D sessions for his kids. And I said, imagine if your kids said, hey, I don't like that I'm wearing leather armor. Give me a minute to go get some full plate mail and put on, you know, all this other stuff that's not what they're starting the game with. You know, what would you as the dungeon master say? And he agreed. He got where I was coming from because he wanted to go get, I don't know, rocket launchers and stuff like that. And I was like, well, chill out there, you know. Um, because we're by the way, this like we're doing a D20 modern thing. It was kind of inspired by Shadowrun or what was the name of that Will Smith movie where it's like they're cops in Los Angeles, but one of them's an orc. It's called like Bright or Blight or something like that. You get the gist though, right? Where it's fantasy stuff, but in on modern day Earth. And so he's like, well, let's, you know, because things on Earth exist, I want them. And like I basically want to nuke the dungeon. And I was like, that's not the adventure I have planned, you know. So he was like, okay, okay. Um, and then one of the hellhounds hits the human cleric who was supposed to be a chaplain from the US military. He gets taken down to 0 hit points. He goes down and is horribly burnt. One of the hellhounds hits the dwarven fighter, burns his beard off. This guy's got burns on him, not as bad as the human, but he's still burned up pretty bad. But he's still standing with like 2 hit points left, something like that. Um, and so there were NPCs in the party. I had them run out of the dungeon because they're right there at the beginning. So it's super easy for them to leave the dungeon and go around the sides to take cover. And so I was thinking, like, you know, when I think of an action movie or something, I imagine people hiding behind a marble pillar or something like that when you're going to have a shootout. You kind of pop out, take off, you know, take a few shots, and then go back into your hiding place, take cover, right? And like nobody did that. Brad at one point laid down on the floor, but the angle he was at, the dog could still just use a breath weapon, right? You know what I mean? So like everything went wrong. And so what they end up doing is they spend several rounds in there. So right at the beginning of the dungeon, it's almost a total party kill. And so everybody goes out, they're dragging party members out, uh, and they shut the doors. I remember my wife was like, does it count as us defeating the dungeon if we just weld these doors shut and don't do the dungeon at all? And I was like, no. What are you talking about? Like, no, that's not how this goes. And so Brad's troll, because they're in a cemetery. Um, and so, and I forget the name of it now. It was like Brompton Cemetery or something. It's like a real cemetery in London. And so he starts grabbing tombstones and setting them in front of this door. And as a troll, he has some massive strength. I can't remember what it was now. We'd looked it up at the time, but it was super easy for him to like pick up a tombstone and just carry it around. So he starts setting these things here so that, the hellhounds didn't have the ability to open the doors. There were like skeletons and zombies and stuff inside, that are kind of like spawning and coming out and pushing on the doors. They can't get the doors open with all that stone blocking the way. And so then the party goes to an emergency room, and they wanted to get the human cleric some medical attention. And then I think Brad was sort of struggling to, like, I don't think we were on the same page, because I remember when he was printing off 3D printing miniatures for us to use. And he kept talking about like steampunk stuff for the dwarf, like a steampunk gun or steampunk armor or something like that. And I kept trying to explain to him, I'm like, no, man, like it's the modern day. So the dwarf would be dressed in like tactical gear that like a SWAT officer would wear. You know what I mean? Um, and like he wouldn't have a steampunk gun, he would have like a normal gun. And like I feel like Brad hasn't seen movies or whatever where it mixes like fantasy with stuff that's not fantasy. So he was like, I think he was just like locked into fantasy mode. And so he kept talking about stuff like healing potions. And I was like, I mean, you can go to the emergency room and get like a first aid kit. Like again, we're just not on that same page. But so they go into the emergency room, and what I decided to do was I said, you know what? When someone's bitten by a zombie, they're going to end up there, and then zombies are going to start biting humans in the emergency room. Because I was running a more of a kind of a Romero kind of a thing with the zombies rather than the way D&D normally does zombies. And I told everybody that up front, you know what I mean? But so that we have a very Romero emergency room is the point, right? And so we start off, and now we've got a new map. And I improvised. I based it on the emergency room that's closest to where I live. That way everybody was kind of familiar with like where are the chairs and where's the metal detector where you walk in at, just all that jazz. And so we set down miniatures here and there, and I was like, so the colored miniatures, the painted miniatures are the humans. And the unpainted miniatures, which by the way was Brad's idea, it was a really good idea. The unpainted miniatures are the zombies. And so on round one, there's a little bit of everything. And then we were going through as zombies were trying to bite the guy nearest to him, and we roll for all this. And I don't know how many rounds in we get, but by maybe like round 5 or 6, something like that, everybody in the ER is a zombie, like unanimously. So before that happened, when it was a mix of humans and zombies, my wife's character, that is the half dragon air maiden, um, it's about the size of an alligator, basically, right? It runs low to the ground fast between this crowd of people and took 2 rounds to get from the entrance to triage. And so it goes in triage, and it's smart, like a dragon. It's an intelligent creature. So it's able to push the door shut. And I can't remember now if we said she locked the door or if she like knocked a file cabinet over in the door for whatever reason, though, like nothing could get in at her. But so she's in there looking for this first aid kit. Meanwhile, Brad is out in the lobby and he grabs a fire axe, and so he hits a zombie. And there was a zombie fighting with a human, and so I said that Brad hits the zombie, and we're looking at where the squares are. And I said, but here's the thing, is because I was treating it like in some zombie movies, and obviously there's so many different kinds of zombie movies, there's a bunch of different takes on how zombies work. But I'd said up front that part of the danger was going to be if you get their bodily fluids on you, you're infected. And I said, so this is a strategy game, and you need to think. It's like it's the puzzle solving aspect of D&D is you need to really think about how you are going to approach this situation, because I had the zombies only move 1 square around, right? Um, but you got to line up your shots, and if you do it wrong, stuff's going to go wrong. And so on Brad's turn, he hits a zombie that's attacking a human, but then the splatter hits the human. And then on the following turn, the human is now a zombie and it attacks Brad. So we saw how fast that was, right? And Brad, I don't know how to describe it. I think that I was putting him in situations that he's never been in a role playing game. I'll put it that way. So I think like he didn't know if he wanted to just run into the middle of the crowd of zombies and start like swinging, you know what I mean? Like, and I had suggested to him, I was like, maybe you should leave the ER. Like, maybe you should back up out of here because you're going to force them. Like, how many can actually get through the doorway at a time? Right? Versus just being surrounded by them on all sides. Which one of these things sounds better? And the thing I will say for this is it really did remind me of a zombie movie. The way the miniatures were moving on the map and all that. It was really, really good in that sense. Um, and I've done a lot of stuff with zombies over the years, but to me, this adventure actually felt the most like a zombie movie. So at any rate, at first he's like, "Oh, these guys go down easy. I can take a thing out in like one hit because I'm a troll." But then they're advancing on them, and it's yes, they're slow, but they're going to get you in numbers kind of thing. And I think then at some point it was like Brad versus 16 zombies that are all, trying to file out of that door. And so he's taking shots at him and so on and so forth. And I want to say he rolled a critical failure and then the zombie rolled really high. However it was, though, he finally gets bitten. And then we had a question about, well, can a troll turn into a zombie? And I was using Chat GPT because it knows a lot about D&D. And thus far, anyways, when I ask it a D&D question, it always gets it right. And the nice thing, too, is I can say, where is that rule found? And it can tell me it's in the DMG of this edition on this page, yada, yada, yada. And it's right, And so I can double check what it's telling me. But I'm like, hey, can a troll become a zombie? And it was like, yes. That, the zombie template can be added to anything as long as it's not like a construct or an elemental or whatever. It listed the few things, right? But trolls were for sure a thing, and there are troll zombies, and one of the the monster manuals and, so on and so forth. So, so then Brad is like, okay, uh, he's like, where does it bite me? And I was like, I think it would bite your neck. And he's like, is it okay if it bit my hand instead so I can do something about it? And I was like, okay. And so then he's like, all right, so on that one turn I get or whatever, I want to chop off my arm with my axe. And I said, the axe you've been using to kill zombies? And he's like, yes. And I was like, final answer? And he's like, yes. And I was like, okay. And so everybody's kind of quiet. And I was like, so you have this axe covered in zombie sludge, you know what I mean? And everybody's like, oh no. And I was like, so you cut off your arm, which hurts, but now you've got zombie sludge on your stump, so you see where this is going. So he turns, and I think he probably should have turned sort of then and there if I was being consistent with the rules I myself had set up at that point, right? But he's like, for my last remaining action, I want to kind of run away from the party and I want to try to get zombies to chase after me. Um, and so he picks a direction and runs, and I just kind of let him do it. I was just trying to be nice, and it's like, well, okay, fine, you do that. I'll let you go out on your own terms or whatever. Um, and then so the party sees this, the sort of the others, they drag the wounded off in a different direction, right? And at that point, they were like, we don't even want to play this anymore. And and then my wife is this dragon thing in the triage office with zombies beating on the door trying to get in there. So she's like, I want to go into an air duct, kind of like John McClane from Die Hard. And I want to just have this medical kit. And she asked if it could have a strap, like a black canvas strap kind of thing, like a book bag or whatever. And I was like, that's fine. I don't care, whatever. She's like, I want to sort of sling that over me and go into the air vents and just get away. And the last thing she said was, I'm going to, because her parents were adventurers. We talked about that a lot prior to the last game session. Um, and she's like, they came to Earth in spelljammers and stuff, and it looks like crap is really hitting the fan. I want to get to a spelljammer and just leave. If there's going to be a zombie apocalypse or something, I just want off of Earth. And so that's where we left it. that, that was the end of the adventure. Um, so after the game, I touched base with Brad because he hasn't played with me too much. And he certainly hasn't played Dungeons and Dragons with me very much. And I've played some D&D that he ran, and we don't always agree on the rules. Like there will be stuff where I don't know if he's like not looking up what it says in the book, or if there's a misunderstanding, or maybe I'm the one with a misunderstanding. But he mentioned before that there's certain things he does where he just figures out something that he likes and he does that. Um and then on my end, kind of like none of the D&D games I've ever played went that way, you know what I mean? So I feel like if I say we butt heads, that makes it sound like a bigger thing than it really is. But when he was running stuff, I was kind of calling timeouts and like asking him a lot of questions. Like, wait, what are you doing now? Like how are you rolling for this or that? Or, what's going on? And he would explain his thought process. And we were not on the same page. So then, as one would probably expect, as I'm running this, I'm trying to run D&D kind of the way all it's always been for me, right? That like whoever I played with, however they did it, that's how I try to do it, right? And so that's not been his experience. So he was, I think, kind of weirded out. And I think that because he tends to play with kids, he's used to like, how do I want to put it? I think maybe he's a little more used to like happy endings and things are a little easier and you know what I mean? So I made sure to touch base and say, "Hey, I'm not I really wasn't trying to screw you over. I'm just a big believer that um you like there needs to be consequences, like some of your characters are going to die. But then for the ones that don't, you're going to feel a greater sense of accomplishment that they stayed alive and like so on and so forth." And that made sense to him. So he seemed okay. My my wife was like, no, like I don't like this. And they were both kind of talking about they weren't nuts about the modern day Earth thing. I had thought that for story reasons, it made sense to go back to Earth. They were kind of like, let's just go to some other planet, a Spelljammer that's a fantasy planet, and let's just do fantasy stuff. And then my other thought there was when, like I said earlier, when Brad was talking about like, should the dwarf have like steampunk guns? You know what I mean? I thought as much as that it was a stumbling block for him, uh, yeah, maybe just straight fantasy is going to be easier then. Maybe that'll be the way to go. Um, so I don't know. We just played the game, everything's still fresh. I'm gonna take a week off, talk to everybody through the week on social media, through email and stuff like that, see what everybody wants to do. Sounds like my wife is going to keep the same character. Um, Brad is talking about rolling up a new character that is a monk. What are they called? I want to say tabaxi or whatever. They're like cat folk of some sort, He wanted to be like a cheetah guy that's a monk. And I was like, that's fine, I don't care. That's cool. Um, but that, nothing's set in stone yet. That's where we're at right now. Um, we'll see. We'll see how things go next weekend, and whatever we end up doing, I will make a video about it. But that's it for this one. Hopefully, you guys thought that this was interesting. If so, as always, we would love it if you support the channel by smashing that like button, making sure you're subscribed, and leaving us a comment. And from all of us here at our D&D game, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next adventure.